Thank you so much for joining me today. So this session is going to be about AI enablement starts with governance. So probably 30 minutes is not enough to talk everything around AI. So let me set the intentions of this session today. I'm going to try and cover the what, the why, and the how. So what is unique to AI from a governance lens? Why do we need to have foundations in place and important for AI enablement? And how can we build an unified approach to data and AI governance? I am Jayeeta Bhattacharya, Principal Data and AI Governance Consultant at Billigence. For those of you who are not aware, Billigence is a global data consultancy helping organizations build foundations for AI and beyond. Well, probably this is going to become a norm with AI and advancements. So let's make sure as responsible professionals, we are tagging our AI-generated content, so just putting it out there. Over the years, we have come across a lot of different governance terms. But if we think about it, the underlying principle of governance is still the same. So it's a layer above management that guides and oversees the direction of something. So sets of processes, practices, tools that brings together diverse stakeholders to ensure that data or systems are managed in a way so that it's maximizing the benefits of the company and preventing harm. If we zoom in to data and AI governance, I think given the unique challenges and complexities around AI, there are a few great differentiators we need to think about. And we'll go through them today in this session. Let's start with how do we start understanding or governing our data in a data governance world, right? So you have all forms of data, and then you create a curation layer where we start cataloging what is critical to the business, right? So we catalog, we then add quality measures, we have the lineage extraction, understanding the flow of the priority systems, and then on top of that, we have risks and compliance, so GDPR, privacy, and we enrich it with our business metadata and business context, KPIs, and internal policies. And of course, ownership and stewardship is very important for governance. So what has changed now? Now we are talking about AI models. So similar to what we did for data governance would make sense. We would do a catalog of AI, understand the use cases, make sure it's traceable, reliable, and compliant. And collaboration becomes key because now we have more diverse stakeholders to discuss and collaborate with. But AI models have been there for a number of years. What has changed now? I think everyone knows it. It's generative AI. And so what's the difference in AI models and generative AI? The incredible momentum of Gen AI's interest is actually making organizations think about governance. McKinsey survey says that in 2017, the use of AI was 20%, and now it has raised to 78%. So we understand that it's top for every organization. And that's why we need to understand that we cannot do governance in silos for data and AI. We have to have this unified data and AI governance approach, where we both understand what data are being input to the AI models and outputted from the AI models, the outcomes, and we build a governance structure around those things. Let me ask you a question. I'm not sure how many of you in the audience are now exploring Gen AI, but what are the biggest inhibitors to realizing value from your, for example, AI and ML? And feel free to do a scan, and you can add your inputs. I see someone are, so I'll give you a minute. Those of you who are not comfortable, we can also do show of hands. So do you think it's lack of AI skills? Okay. Do you think it's lack of trust, data quality, which is inhibiting, okay? Or do you think it's collaboration or not getting business results? Okay, I think quality and collaboration is like the most. Let's see if we have something. Oh, wow, okay. Data quality, thank you for your input. So data quality looks like on the top. And then we have trust in data, again, quality. So it's interesting because we are not far away from what IDC Wave 2 survey says. So Wave 2 survey says that data availability and quality was the biggest inhibitor to AI and ML. So we need to understand that quality is in the forefront. Let's talk about quality a minute. I know there's obviously other factors contributing, but we focus on quality. Let's take a simple AI lifecycle. And this is very simplified, right? So for traditional ML models or generative AI models, we know that AI relies heavily on vast amounts of data. So data is inputted, and then the model is trained or fine-tuned based on the data in generative AI models, and then we deploy and keep monitoring it. So data is most important for AI models. And data is, if you have, for example, accurate, complete, relevant, and up-to-date data, you know that you're putting in contextual and relevant data that is unique to your business for your AI models. But we also have to make sure that the model's performance is checked, right? So if data is of bad quality, we know that models are going to amplify it. But if the model's performance is not good, we have to keep monitoring the models and update the parameters, right? So model evaluation metrics are important. And in the age of generative AI, for example, Forbes mentioned that by 2025, actually, 90% of our internet is going to be generative AI content. So the model should be able to understand the drifts and the collapse and be able to retrain with the actual data that is relevant to the company. So we understand that when we talk about AI governance, we have to still have data in order first. So we cannot talk about AI without talking about data. So data needs to be still relevant for my unique business. It still needs to have trust and transparency. And on top of that, we include AI, right? All forms of AI. And there's another aspect or extensions to AI governance, which is unique. There's a mix of necessity now to have different skill sets. So we still need to have, for example, AI core expertise, data science expertise, and people who understand the policy ecosystem properly and the regulations that are coming out so that they can implement them for their governance programs. And when it comes to policy ecosystem, you must have seen these news, right? So data breaches across the world. And this is where traditional compliance teams comes in. So we have to make sure that we have classifications, we have PII, and we have tagged our data properly so that sensitive data is not disclosed. Because if you don't have your foundations of compliance in place, in control, then AI can weave in through the compliance gaps, right? So we have to make sure that foundations are still there. And then you have these other forms of news, which is why people are so agitated in a way. So AI is swearing at customers, and it's providing misinformation. And when we have such a powerful technology where new cases are being logged every month, like up more than 50 new cases are logged every month, people are trying to understand, how do I trust AI, right? So that's the emerging risks, which is different in AI governance. So we are talking about societal, which is bias, discrimination, hallucinations. And we know there are environmental implications. So for example, we know there's so much energy and water needed for maintaining these AI models. So when we have such a powerful technology, we are asking, do we understand the risks and oversight mechanisms? And that is why we need governance. But we also have seen AI doing great in the field of, let's say, healthcare or retail or in normal productivity gains. And if AI is positioned correctly, it can become an interface to surface insights or make sure that we are increasing our productivities and triggering actions through AI. And that's the balance business is trying to find. So they have to have creative apps and cater to personalized products for their customers, but they also have to make sure that they have responsible governance in place. Because we know that AI enablement without governance can lead to chaos. And we have seen it in history with data as well. So we have to make sure that we understand what is at stake here. And that's why we go back to our basics. What do we do with data governance? We still start with assessing, understanding what we have and what we need in place. Then we embed this governance framework. So when we are embedding this governance framework, we have to keep in mind what are the metrics that is valuable to the company, to the organizations. And then we can confidently scale and sustain. Now, it's not three easy steps, we all know that. But how do we start understanding it? Because one of the critical areas around AI is the risks, right? So that's why we look towards standards and regulations, what are coming out. And one of the key things is AI ethics. So EU requirements say that there's these broadly three main areas where we have to understand and put oversight mechanisms, right? So trustworthy and safe, what does it mean? So you can have examples like metrics of measuring hallucinations. You have to have metrics and thresholds of saying that no, zero tolerance on outputs leading to harm or legal violations. Then you have responsible and accountable. So that's where you have to make sure that you have AI governance processes in place. You have human oversight, and you're putting in filters of how people can prompt something, because we don't want sensitive data to go disclosed within the organization or outside the organization. And then you have transparent and explainable. So these are things where we have to make sure the models are actually cataloged, like we saw in the first presentation, AI registry. So we have to make sure we have an end-to-end traceability of which data sets are used, which models are used, for what purpose. And then you have to also document the decisions from all the diverse stakeholders that you need to involve. Now, these can be not simple metrics, but trade-offs as well. So we have to make sure that we understand the business objectives of the organization, and we have in place the metrics or trade-offs that aligns with the values of the company. And can you still hear me? And there's the AI regulation is on top legislative agenda. So we have to make sure we follow the EU guidelines. For example, EU provides you the risk classifications. And say, for example, you're putting in the AI governance process, right? The first thing you have to do is you classify your AI according to EU regulations. Once you classify, then you also have to understand which stakeholders you need to involve. So it might be legal, your security team, your AI core expertise, your AI ethics, HR, and these are important to know, because otherwise you are missing out and there are gaps that you need to identify initially. And then it's also important to understand what role are you playing, because the majority of obligations does fall on the providers. But we also have to understand that as deployers, if you make enough changes to your model, you can become a provider. So then the obligations fall on you. So it's very important to understand these nuances within the policies and the regulation. And that's the reason why we need to have and understand the evolving regulation landscape, right? So there's a number of regulations that are coming out at different speeds across different jurisdictions. And there's also standards we look towards to. Obviously, we have traditionally NIST frameworks and OECD principles, but now we have the ISO standard. So the ISO 42001 is a framework that helps you to develop, implement, monitor, and improve your AI systems responsibly. So these are the standards and regulations that we need to keep track on. And that's why we need people who understands the policy ecosystem. Now, how do we make sure that people are understanding these policy ecosystem or the changes? So you need to have a way to change these principles to practice. Can you still hear me? So you have to change the principles to practice, right? So let's go back to our AI life cycle and let's expand it a little bit. Now, it's important to highlight that the difference between traditional machine learning models and generative AI models is that in generative AI models, certain phases have shortened. For example, developing and designing models, right? Now you have pre-trained models. But then there are other phases that becomes more important. So you still have to have a business understanding. You still need to have an understanding of what the objectives are for your particular business, not what it was pre-trained with. And then you have to equip the community with the right data so that they can use that to fine-tune and evaluate and validate whether these LLMs are going to help you. And it should be across the life cycle, right? We should have checks across the life cycle. Let's say transparency and explainability. And we spoke about this. So we have to make sure that the users understand what the model is about, what the purposes are, how is it going to be used, shared, retained. Then you have risk management. So if we take an example of bias, say for example, because bias can be in your data set while you're building your AI application, while you're testing, or while you're putting it out in the market and it's learning from its available data, right? So we need to have risk management across the life cycle and beyond. And this is just an example. Then we have AI impact assessments. So this is important because this is where you bring together diverse stakeholders, like we spoke about earlier, and they are going to provide their decisions, right? So we need to understand why they are providing certain decisions, what are the mitigation actions, and how do we make sure that we are using AI, which is going to benefit the organization. So we need to identify the use cases, classify them based on EU AI Act, and then add our decisions and make sure what is approved or what is not approved. And this should be part before we deploy. For example, third-party applications, we might even do this before we procure something. So it's important to understand where you put these governance across the life cycle. And then you have security and privacy. We don't want AI to have unauthorized access to something sensitive, right? So we don't want to disclose sensitive data and safeguard them. So we need to make sure we have our foundations in place. And like we said, for compliance, it's very important to have data compliance in place. And then we have to build on top of that for AI-specific compliance and security. Accountability chain. I really like this term because it's not just responsibility of one person. There's a number of people involved in different stages, and it's a chain, and sometimes we collaborate. So we need to understand the reporting lines. How do we approach someone? Who is the right person? And we need to do that for individual of these steps. That's going to help us in the long run. And all of this is not done in one, for example, session, right? We need to have continuous literacy programs. And literacy is not unique to AI, for example. We have done literacy for different kinds of domains. And we need to understand that we need to get on this literacy as quick as possible. And now AI literacy is actually part of legal requirement. So we would start aligning it with the business objectives of the use cases. Then we would build and promote awareness. When we are building guidelines, it's important to mention the do's and the don'ts, because most often people don't know the boundaries of how to not use something. Then we create tailored training. For example, we have these core expertise in AI, we have core expertise in policy, so let's make some tailored training so that people understand where they stand and what they're supposed to do. And community of practice, because that's where ideas grow, right? People understand how to interact and share ideas and insights, that trends that are going on. And we refine as the technology is evolving. So all in all, we started with this unified approach. And it's important to highlight, if we look at it through layers, say data, risk, organizational layer, each of these layers have something unique we need to consider for AI. We can still apply the same approach for data, but we need to make sure that when we are doing data and AI governance, for example, data and AI model layer should have the infrastructure for productivity and making sure the AI models are able to run in that infrastructure. We make sure in the risk layer, we have all the considerations for AI, so ethical AI, and the risk management, and the feedback mechanisms. And we build them in line into the life cycles, not after something has gone wrong. So we need to have inline governance. And then, of course, we have the organizational layer, which is giving you the strategic alignment of how you move forward, how do you adopt, and the literacy programs. In summary, what I wanted to say within this session is that we are not starting from scratch. There's a lot of things that we can reuse and resources we have if you have a data governance foundation. So let's reuse those resources and build on top of that. So there are some internal factors we definitely have to align before you move towards your governance or AI enablement programs. And those are strategies. So you might have corporate strategy, but you have to align that with your AI strategy. You might have executive sponsorship, but are they having the sponsorship at the right levels and for the right things? There's a survey from McKinsey which says that the obstacle to responsible AI is 51% knowledge gaps and 45% resource and budget constraints. So let's make sure we're putting our money and resources at the right places to enable companies to do AI. And then, of course, we need to have data governance foundation, and then we build on the tools and technologies we have. And along with these, we will always have external factors that we need to evolve and adapt to. So we'll have regulatory changes. We will have AI evolution. But we have seen that in the past. For example, like Moore's law has historically guided expectations for computing advancements. Similarly, there is a research from Meteor which says the length of task AI can do is now doubling every 7 months. So we know there's so much to come in future. So we have to be ready to adapt. And I'm going to leave you with this. As governance professionals, I don't want to create new buzzwords or new acronyms. Let's do what we are supposed to do. Let's govern our data and AI. So let's have our goals set up, not just because it's cool, to make sure that it benefits our company. Let's have diverse stakeholders, and we outreach to diverse stakeholders to make sure we have the right people in place so that we can identify the potential risks and gaps. Make sure we have data governance foundations in place to get AI enabled much stronger in value. We have to have human oversight, which is of utmost importance. And responsibility. It's important to make sure that we are responsible. It's not enough to have just oversight, because at this point, AI can imitate intelligence, but not responsibility. So we have to make sure we are the ones who are taking those responsibilities. And we nurture an AI literate culture and evolve with the technology, because AI enablement and governance should be going hand in hand. Thank you.